all too familiar pandemic way.
Sometimes in 2020, you just have to laugh, then roll with it.
Everything on schedule.
Rarely is it ever these days, especially for Shortridge High.
Are we missing Miss Scarlett?
Their theater program is now performing from home.
I got an email about this virtual production of Clue.
That means Colonel Mustard in his bedroom with a Zoom call. If only solving the mystery was that easy.
It's a virtual play based on a movie, based on a board game, based on a book.
With each performer
Hold up.
left to turn their personal square into a miraculous, intermingled digital performance.
So using the camera as like another character, and how do you hand something to another person?
These are questions director Shelby Myers is solving.
Sometimes you'll see one character and we'll focus on one character.
We've never met.
Sometimes, you know, you have two characters going back and forth. Sometimes it's all characters on screen.
While it may not be ideal,
Oh man, it's been difficult.
Nova Esther would rather have this than lose a senior year performance.
We've got like internet issues and camera issues,
Oh, I just saw her. She's in the waiting room.
and like timing wise, it's a bit hard to do things.
Yet they persevere. Performance must go on, not just for the audience, but themselves,
This is actually like affected my mental health a lot.
giving these students
Bonjour, madame.
a feeling of normalcy, camaraderie, and education, what school is meant to be.
This has turned out to be quite some crowd.
So when the lights randomly go out this Friday,
Into the kid.
they will have solved the pandemic's puzzle. In the North Side, I'm Mike Sullivan, CBS 4 News.
The group will first perform this Friday. To get tickets, head to the Shortridge High School Facebook page, and there will be a link to an event. The tickets will be sold through Broadway on demand.
Hi. Hello. My name is Valentina. I'm a senior. I'm in the softball team in the Shortridge High School. Today we have Miss Sara Hindi is in the Community Engagement Coordinator at Exodus Refugee Immigration. As the Community Engagement Coordinator, Sara develops and supports outreach, educates, and inspires and motivates community members to engage in the mission of Exodus throughout financial and in-kind donation, volunteerism, and advocacy. She recruits, trains, and supervises volunteers and interns. She also creates and shares communication content for Exodus social media and website. Sara has served the refugee community in Indianapolis for 6 years with Exodus. She holds a bachelor's degree in media and public affairs, and she is fluent in Arabic.
Thanks, Valentina. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much, Valentina, for having me this morning, and thank you to all of those tuning in.
So I wanted to ask you some questions. Since you work in the Exodus, could you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, of course. So Exodus Refugee Immigration is a local nonprofit in Indianapolis that is a refugee resettlement agency, and that's contracted by the government to provide, to welcome and provide services for refugees. And what that means is that refugees are vulnerably displaced populations that are forced to flee their home countries due to reasons of persecution of religion, race, political opinion, social group, and they are outside of their country of origin. So refugee status is granted overseas before folks arrive in the United States. And once they do arrive in the United States, we meet families at the airport and provide them with direct services, from case management to enrolling kids in school to giving families school supplies and school uniforms and clothing and winter coats and whatever that may be, and all their basic necessities, as well as helping parents find jobs in the city so that they are self-sufficient, independent, and are able to provide for their families in their new homes in Indianapolis. And we also serve not only refugees, but also asylees, asylum seekers, and special immigrant visas, so other forcibly displaced populations that the process is a little different for asylum seekers and asylees to come to the United States. They have to be in the United States to go through the process to seek status. So that's just a little bit about Exodus and the populations that we serve.
Well, that's very interesting. Another question is, how did you know you wanted to work in the refugee resettlement?
So I got involved with Exodus when I was an undergrad at IUPUI. IUPUI, the campus is like 7 minutes away from the office, which was really nice. And so my junior year of college, I was involved as a intern, and then as a volunteer, and I continued to stay connected with Exodus, and that's how I was able to learn a little bit more about the work that they do and their mission. And I really fell in love with the work that they do as on a professional level of just, this is, I just knew automatically that this is what I wanted to do just because I enjoyed my internship so much, but also on a personal level of connecting to the mission as well as a immigrant myself and my family. And I remember coming to the United States when I was 5 years old, which is a very young age, and I was able to learn English very fast, and that wasn't a problem for me. But I remember my mom always struggled with the language barriers a little bit, and I just always remember being when our first few years of being in the United States and just being lonely and not knowing anyone and not really going anywhere. And we even joke, like my siblings and I joke about quarantine, because quarantine was our life when we first came to the United States, because we didn't have much except going to school, and then I was able to go to kindergarten, and that's kind of when I was able to meet people and learn English and all of that. So I was able to really connect personally with the mission as well, with my personal story. And I'm also fluent in Arabic, and so I was able to interpret for our clients. And I thought that knowing that language was really neat, because growing up, I just spoke Arabic in my household. I didn't think it would be relevant in Indianapolis to ever learn, to know Arabic outside of my home, but it was something really neat that I was able to use that language skill as well.
That's very interesting. Of knowing a different language and being able to help out for your workplace. What are some common misconceptions that people have about refugees?
I would definitely say there's definitely several misconceptions, and in general, there's just a lot of miseducation about refugees and who refugees are. I think people don't realize the long process that refugees go through to come to the United States, from security screenings to background checks to interviews, ongoing interviews before they even arrive the country. And I don't think people realize that. I think they just think it's they just show up in Indiana randomly, or I don't know what people think the process is for refugees is like, but they definitely don't understand that they are the most thoroughly vetted group to come to the United States. And that's very not hard to explain to people, but it's a misconception because people just constantly fear refugees in general and have security concerns regarding refugees, although they possess no security concerns, just because of the really long, vigorous process that's set up for refugees to arrive. And I would say the second misconception is that refugees come to the United States and stay on public benefits. And that is true in the beginning, where refugees are eligible for public benefits. They apply for food stamps and Medicaid and welfare, and in the beginning as support so that they can get up on their feet and are able to provide for themselves and their families in the future. But that's not the case when the people start working. So once refugees start working, their benefits decline, and then at some point their benefits are cut off if they meet a certain income. And so I think that's something that people don't understand. They think it's something that refugees get thousands and thousands of dollars from the government, and they're constantly spending government money, which is not true. Refugees are actually taxpayers, and they do bring in millions and millions of dollars into the economy as well.
since we're talking about refugees, what would be the differences between a refugee and an immigrant?
So a refugee is someone who has been forced to flee their home country due to reasons of persecution. And there are 5 reasons of persecution. So religion, race, political opinion, social group, and they are outside of their country of origin. So refugees don't have really much of a say if whether or not to leave their home countries. They have to flee. They are in danger. They are in they leave their home countries for a better life, to stay alive, just because they are it's life and death for refugees in their home countries. So that's the decision that they have to make is, if I leave right now, I can keep my family safe. Versus an immigrant. An immigrant is someone who, one, it's a different process. There's different paperwork, and it looks a little different in that process. But immigrants choose to leave their home countries because of just a better opportunity in general, whether that be education, going to college, getting a better job, whatever that may be. So refugees definitely is usually much more vulnerable than an immigrant in terms of why they are leaving their home countries.
I wanted to ask this one question. Where are most of the refugees in Indianapolis from, and what languages do they speak?
Yeah, so the population that we've served and welcomed in Indianapolis have been people from Burma. Indianapolis actually has a large, Indianapolis has a large Burmese population. We have about 18,000 to 19,000 refugees from Burma living in Indianapolis, who are, of course, even no longer refugees at this point, just because after a year, refugees are eligible for their green card. After 5 years, refugees are eligible for their American citizenship. So at this point, so many of them are U.S. citizens in general. And the second largest population that we've served are people from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And first, at some point, they were the fastest largest growing refugee population in the United States as well. And then we've also welcomed people from Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Sudan, so a wide variety of countries. And I'd say we've welcomed and served refugees, asylees, and asylum seekers from about 50 countries. And they speak a wide variety of languages, even if they come from the same country. So there's so many languages in Burma that if you speak a certain dialect or language, you might not even understand that other person. But people from Burma, common languages are usually Falam, Chinhaka, Burmese, Karen, Karenni, so a wide variety of languages. And then people from the Democratic Republic of the Congo will speak either Swahili or Kinyarwanda, and sometimes they also speak French as well as a second language. And a lot of times they'll also speak even more languages in terms of, the village that they had been living in. It's very common that I hear people say, I speak 4 or 5 different languages just from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So that's really neat. And our clients from Syria and Iraq usually speak Arabic or Kurdi or Kurmanji. And then our clients from Eritrea and Ethiopia usually speak Tigrinya or Amharic.
So I see that in 2017, there was a travel ban. How did it impact the work you do in Expo?
Yeah, so in terms of the work that we do, we have definitely had over the last 4 years, national policies affect our local communities, and that being one through the populations that we've served. So people from Syria was on the Muslim ban, and people from Syria were the 3rd largest population we had welcomed in 2016. And we had expected for that population to really grow over the next few years after that. But unfortunately, they continued to decline. So in 2016, we welcomed 122 Syrian refugees. And then in 2019, we welcomed 7 Syrian refugees. So it has really impacted the number that we have welcomed in terms of our new neighbors in the city. And it has also impacted families as well. So there's a lot of families from Syria and other countries that are on the travel ban that have been waiting to reunite with family members. For example, just in a couple of months ago, we welcomed a Syrian husband who reunited with his wife at the airport, and they hadn't seen each other for 4 years because they were going through that process to be reunited, and it was such a long process. And it was refugee resettlement is a long process in general, but because he was from Syria, it was an extra longer process because of that ban. So that was just one of many beautiful family reunions we have reunited, but it's really sad to think that there are definitely so many more families that are waiting to be reunited with their loved ones.
So, it depending on where you're from, it's how long it takes you, or like how to be able to come here.
Yeah, so the process typically years, before the administration, it used to take 8 months. That's if, from start to finish, there weren't any pauses. But typically, and that's like if refugees were to go through that process all at once. But typically, it takes years and years for people to go through the process. Unfortunately, it's always been this long, but now it's even been a longer process.
What are one of the greatest barriers that refugees face once they arrive in Indianapolis?
I would say there are many barriers, of course, but I'll name two. So the first one would be language barriers. So both for parents and their kids and families. And so a lot of times people arrive and they do speak some English. Sometimes they speak fluent English if they did go to a university in their home countries or in the country that they were living in. But often families don't speak any English, and so they struggle to, when you go to the grocery store and communicate with people, or even with their kids' schools, and how do you communicate with the teacher when you don't speak English? And they run through a lot of language barriers with that. And then the second barrier I would say is transportation. So we show our clients how to ride the Indigo bus in the city, which is what they use to get around the city. But sometimes parents or adults will live outside of they live in Indianapolis, but they will work outside of Indianapolis in different warehouses outside of the city. And so that provides, of course, a transportation barrier because Indigo is only in Indianapolis. And so clients have to rely on carpooling with their neighbors or maybe their colleagues so that they could get to work and help navigate that transportation barrier until they are able to go through the long process of getting a driver's license, a permit, and a driver's license, and for some, learning how to drive, because some people didn't know how to drive in their home countries. It wasn't a need because they had public transportation all over the city or the country that they were living in.
Yeah. In your opinion, what should politics do to advance human rights for refugees around the world?
Ooh, there's so much, right? I think one, just empathy and understanding who refugees are and where they come from, and just and seeing people as people, and understanding that refugees didn't choose to be in this position. That's something I hear often from our clients, and it's something that I hear often from our clients as well, is that we were going to school and we were going to work and we were living a life just like everyone else, and all of a sudden violence or a conflict happened in our city or in our country that affected us, and we've had to then flee, and we were no longer safe. So, and I don't think anyone ever expects themselves to be refugees or to be in that situation to leave their home countries. No one really ever wants to leave their home countries, and it's just a tough decision that people have to make to stay safe. So I really wish that people understood that and paid more attention to just what's happening around the world in terms of the conflicts that are happening, because then people are able to understand really why people are fleeing, and they're not just making false judgments about that.
I have one last question, and then I'll be going for the other people. Last question. Who inspired you to be where you're at now?
What inspired me? I I think one, obviously my parents, and just like the sacrifices that they have made to come to a new country so that their lives can get an education, so their kids can get an education, and to live and to have a better life than they had growing up. So that's something I definitely keep in mind and carry with me wherever I go, as well as a lot of the mentors that I have had in school. So from high school mentors and college mentors and professors and educators in my life have definitely inspired me to create my own path and to, you know, realize my passions and to go chase my passions and not think of anything else but to keep going and keep accomplishing my goals.
So, someone who had said, how does it feel to be an IUPUI student?
Go Jaguars, best school ever. If anyone's considering IUPUI, you're always welcome to reach out to me to ask more questions. I'm happy to connect with you, but I absolutely loved my experience at IUPUI. I went to Ivy Tech for freshman year of college, and I was in the Passport program, which is basically a partnership between Ivy Tech and IUPUI. So you finish certain credits at Ivy Tech, and then you automatically transfer IUPUI, and your credits transfer, and there weren't any problems with that process. And so I highly recommend it. I loved IUPUI. It was great to be in the city that I had grown up in, and I was able to learn more about the city and be involved with Exodus, but also so many other nonprofits and internships because it's such a big city and there's so many opportunities for networking and getting connected to the community and learning more about it. So go Jaguars.
What countries do most refugees come from in the U.S.?
In the U.S. in general, I think, again, people from Burma, it's a large population that other cities have also welcomed. People from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, people from Syria. There's a large Syrian population in Sacramento. There's a large Iraqi population in Michigan, in a few different cities. And there's a large population from Somalia in Minneapolis. There's also a large a population from Afghanistan, I believe in Texas and in California. So I would say a lot of the countries that I mentioned are also the countries that other cities are welcoming as well.
Do you think it's difficult to be granted a refugee status?
Yes, so it is a lot. So the United Nations Commissioner for Higher Refugees is the one that grants refugee status, and that is within itself a process. And I don't think it's difficult to get refugee status, but I do think it is difficult for folks to be considered for resettlement. And so what resettlement means is that countries are, like the United States, and as a part of 34 countries that offers resettlement. And so that means that we're promising refugees a safe and permanent place to call home, where they live in freedom, their kids can go to school, and they have status in the country. I think that process is really hard. So only 1% of refugees, unfortunately, get resettled every year across the world in terms of the countries offering resettlement. And there are 26 million refugees around the world. So that's not a lot of people being resettled each year.
What is the relationship between different refugee communities in Indianapolis?
Good question. So when we look at where clients are going to live before they arrive and where we are going to set up their apartment and housing, we also look at like the neighborhoods and where we have resettled previous clients. So clients who speak, are from maybe the same country or speak the same language are typically always excited to meet new folks, just because they're more familiar with the city and the area, and they want to show a newly arrived refugee around the city, and so that's really exciting for them. But in general, I always see our families connecting at trainings and English classes, and whenever they have the opportunity, because no matter what country they're from, they all know they have so much in common in terms of the traumas that they have faced in life, and their goals of wanting for their kids to be here and get an education them wanting to provide for their families. So a lot of them do end up becoming friends and staying in touch, and they cook for each other, especially when they hear that a newly arrived family is in the neighborhood or moved in the city. They automatically will call Exodus and say, hey, I'd love to meet so-and-so who just arrived, or can you connect me with them? And we can go from there. So I've definitely seen there's so much welcome within the refugee community as well, who are eager to welcome new refugees so that they could have more friends and give back to the community because they knew what it was like for them to when they first arrived.
Do you think the process of allowing refugees to enter the United States needs improvement?
Absolutely. In terms of improvement, I think it's more just really looking at the process and looking at how effective it is. Like asking ourselves questions of like, why is it taking so long, so many years and years for people to come to the United States? And, you know, how can we make that process a more efficient process in terms of time? Because we have seen that people are waiting for so long in refugee camps or in other cities that they are not even safe in those countries, and they are dying in those countries because of health concerns or limited access to health care and all of that. So we definitely need to look at the process and better understand the need for refugees around the world.
What can make the process to become a U.S. citizen shorter?
So there's not really a way to make that shorter. You just have to, just how the process is, you have to be in the United States and have a green card, living in the United States and have a green card for a minimum of 5 years to then apply to become a citizen. There's not really a way for it to be any shorter.
Have you ever seen or heard other refugees or immigrants that they think that they are better?
Like they think they're better than like people living in the United States?
It's like refugees. It's between refugees and immigrants. Like,
oh, like tension?
Yeah.
I don't think so. Not that I've heard of or know of. I think there's, I mean, no one's perfect, and you know, I'm sure people, you know, get into disagreements all the time, but I don't think that there's like a tension regarding different groups.
What can public schools do to support refugees?
Good question. So, I mean, specifically in Indianapolis, I think there's so many schools that our clients are, you know, attend and go to school. And so understanding that, I think when you hear stories of refugees and immigrants, you know, when you're reading a book or watching the news or a documentary, whatever that may be, understanding that they're also in our local communities as well, and they could be in your schools, and you just might not know it because it's not something that people just go around yelling. And you know, because you don't notice that they are any different from you, because they are probably not. They might have a different culture, or eat different foods, or you know, practice a certain faith, or don't practice a faith. So, but other than that, they're in school, they're learning just like you are, and they like school and their teachers, and everyone likes lunch, and that's something we can all agree on. But of course, they have other favorite subjects that they all like to do. So, and to give you all an example, one of our clients lives on, was welcomed in Indianapolis 4 or 5 years ago, lives on the west side, and attended the newcomer program school for about a year. He didn't speak any English, and then he transferred to another Indianapolis public school, and then he ended up graduating as a senior over the summer from George Washington High School. And he basically was valedictorian of his class. So he went from not knowing any English when he first arrived to then graduating top of his class, and he received a full ride, and now goes to Wabash College and is studying to be a computer and I think he either wanted computer science or computer engineering. I'm not sure which one he ended up on, but that's because you know, computers was a passion of his since when he was living and you know, back in his home country, and so that's something he's able to pursue now, and it's really exciting for us to see that. So in terms of public schools specifically, or students in general, ways that you can support. One, if you're ever interested in hosting a donation drive, we've seen a lot of students throughout the year host donation drives, whether that be winter coats, school uniforms, and school supplies for clients, or other items that we are in need of. That's one way. The second opportunity that you can do is to just educate yourself more about, the populations that live in the city, the different cultures and the diversity that we have in the city. Go to a new local restaurant of a food that you've never tried and experience that. We have so many ethnic restaurants around the city, and it's something that people don't realize, but I hope you all take advantage of and explore. And then I think the third thing that everyone can do is just be kind to one another. When you don't really know or you don't really know what people are going through, and you don't necessarily always understand where your classmates, what they're going through, what they have been through. And so being kind to one another and getting to know one another, and not just always being on your smartphones or TikTok, because I have an 11-year-old sister and I know what you all do all the time. It's definitely become an obsession. So yeah, talk to each other more and get to know some of your classmates that you haven't maybe talked to before.
Well, thank you so much, Ms. Cindy, for your time and your service, for coming and talking about your experience and all these questions that were asked.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you all so much for having me. Best of luck with the rest of the semester and with the remote learning.